Hello, BookTube. I mentioned yesterday that David Wiley and I are doing a quick, informal, spring on you like a trapdoor spider read along of The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien, which is the middle section of his book, The Lord of the Rings, typically viewed as the second volume in the trilogy, The Lord of the Rings. We're hoping that a lot of people join in, but I think that it's a lot of fun to talk about this book anyway. I've heard from quite a few of you that you are overloaded with reading events and commitments for February, so you will just be listening to me talk about the book, but you won't be reading along yourself. I'm hoping that a lot of people find extra time. It's always fun to read or reread Tolkien. But I wanted to do at least one preliminary video ahead of time, before we start digging in, and maybe dig in just a little. We're reading chapters 1 through 5 of the first part of The Two Towers. That's what we're doing for this first week. But they are premised on the huge backstory of The Lord of the Rings, which starts thousands of years before the action opens in the book. When the elves of Middle-earth forged the three rings of power. It's not just one elf. It's not just one elf's idea. It's not made by one elf's piece of armory. It's the great smiths forged the elven rings of power, the three great elven rings of power. And unbeknownst to them, until it's too late, the Dark Lord Sauron forges one ring and infuses it with a huge amount of his own power. And that ring's purpose is to rule all the other rings. But the elves become aware of him, and they hide their three great rings from him. So those rings are not under his control. He makes rings for mortal men and gives them to them, and the ones who wear them fall under his control and become his servants, the Nazgul. He makes rings for the dwarfs in their halls of stone. Dwarfs, we're told, are extremely resistant to the sorcerous co-option of Sauron. They cannot be turned to shadow. And they mostly spend their time digging underground. So by the time Lord of the Rings opens, a handful of those rings have become known or recollected by Sauron, and a lot of them have been destroyed by dragons, who can actually destroy rings, at least minor rings of power. Meaning that this is a contest between the three elven rings and the One Ring. And that contest comes to a head thousands of years before the Fellowship of the Ring starts, when the elves and men band together to defeat Sauron, and they do. And they cut the One Ring from his finger. And the human man, the man who cuts that ring from his finger, decides to keep it. It's already exerting its kind of malevolent hypnosis on this man. He decides to keep it rather than destroy it. The only way to destroy the thing is to cast it into the fires of the mountain where Sauron drew the raw material for it. You can't destroy it any other way. You can't throw it in a normal fire or bash it to death with rocks or anything like that. This man decides to keep it. And it quickly betrays him. And he is killed, and it falls off his finger and rolls into the great river Anduin, the huge river that runs through Middle-earth, and is lost to the knowledge of everyone for years and years and years. Sauron survives and slowly grows in power again, but most of his power is in the ring. And so he's desperate to find it. And as other powers grow in Middle-earth, some of them are also desperate to find it. For instance, in order to contest the growing power of Sauron, the gods of Middle-earth over across the ocean in the west send the wizards. They send the Astari. 5 of them. And 2 of them wander off stage left and are never seen again. And then there are 3 others. One is Radagast, who is a friend to animals and plays a minor role in Lord of the Rings. But the 2 main ones are Gandalf and Saruman. And Gandalf makes no fixed abode. He is a wandering wizard. He is mainly meaning to buck up elves and men, although he seems to have been everywhere. He seems to have wandered everywhere. And Saruman is intent on studying the arts of the enemy himself, studying the arts of Sauron, and that too has its hypnotic ability to ensnare. Saruman's heart is turned to evil, and he sets himself up in a natural fortress named Orthanc, and decides that not only will he build an army and maybe create some rings of power of his own, and also a new kind of orc, and maybe other things as well. Sauron is a tinkerer. He is an engineer. But also he wants to find the One Ring, and he doesn't want to find it to hand it over to the White Council of his fellow powerful beings in Middle-earth so that they can figure out a way to destroy it. He wants to find the One Ring so he can wield it himself and become a rival to the Dark Lord. And in the midst of all of that story, as you will remember if you have read The Hobbit, Bilbo Baggins, a hobbit, a halfling, finds the One Ring. Randomly. Seemingly randomly. It was in the possession of a miserable creature called Gollum. Bilbo Baggins takes the ring and keeps it for decades. Decades and decades. And gradually, he decides that he wants to change, that he wants to leave his little hole under the ground, wants to leave his village, and maybe go to Rivendell, the home of a very powerful elf named Elrond, who, unbeknownst to Bilbo, has one of the great rings of the elves. And Bilbo bequeaths the ring to his cousin Frodo, his younger cousin Frodo, much younger. And it's around that time that Gandalf starts to wonder about that ring. Long time has passed, decades have passed. You'd think he would have wondered about it earlier, but he starts to wonder about that ring. Seems awful odd. What is that ring? Why did it allow Bilbo to live for so long? Why did it allow Gollum to live for so long? Why do I have so many misgivings about it? And gradually, in the course of the events immediately preceding the Fellowship of the Ring, which is the first part of Lord of the Rings, Gandalf discovers that that ring found by accident by Bilbo is the One Ring, which has finally come to light again after centuries, after millennia. It has been found again. And obviously that means that the peril of the entire world has suddenly come upon everybody. That cannot be a minor discovery. That has to signal the end of everything that we once knew. Gandalf says that over and over again to everybody in Lord of the Rings, that no matter what happens, the world you knew before is now over. It's the One Ring that does that. Sauron quickly realizes, in his fortress in Mordor, he quickly realizes that the One Ring has been found. Somebody knows where it is. Somebody has it. And therefore, he's a whisker away from getting it himself. Although he belatedly realizes that his rival, Saruman, who had been kind of his servant, certainly his collaborator, also wants the ring and might be working to get it on his own. And the ring is incredibly powerful, but it's exponentially more powerful if the wearer already has power. And Saruman has a lot of power. He's the eldest and most powerful of the Astari. Effectively the same kind of being as Sauron. The One Ring in his hand could easily spell Sauron's doom, and he knows it. And gradually, everyone else starts to know it as well. But that knowledge, the knowledge of the treason of Sauron's fortress at Isengard, comes very late. It comes too slow for most people. In the course of the Fellowship, at Rivendell, the home of Elrond, it is decided that a mission will be sent to Mordor to destroy the One Ring. There's no hope of safety anywhere else. There's no way to do it. There's no way to deal with this thing. The gods over the sea in the west don't want it. It's not our problem. It's your problem. There's no way for anything else to destroy it, and there's no way to safely ignore it. So it's decided that the ring must be taken to the heart of Mordor and destroyed. And since Sauron is much more powerful in terms of arms and equipment and sorceress ability than anyone on Middle-earth, assembling an army to attack Mordor the way men and elves did originally won't work. So a small embassy is decided on. 9 people. As a kind of counteraction to the 9 Nazgul, the 9 men who have been taken under by the rings that they had. And that party is the Fellowship of the Ring, and you will know it. There are 4 hobbits. There's Frodo and his servant Sam and their 2 friends, Merry and Pippin. There's Legolas, who's an elf. There's Gimli, who's a dwarf. There's Aragorn, who is a ranger, but he is also, unbeknownst to a lot of people at the beginning, the heir to the kingdom of men in Middle-earth. An unbroken line of the kingdom of men. And Boromir also goes along. He is a proud and powerful man of Gondor, a kingdom in the south that is right on the border of Mordor and that has been fighting Mordor for a long time. Boromir has come to look for guidance, to figure out if there's anything that can be done. And he's too proud to ask for help, but he admits that Gondor needs help. Boromir also joins the team, and the last member of the team is Gandalf himself, and they set off from Rivendell. There are some misgivings. Elves and dwarfs, for instance, perennially don't get along. They are age-old enemies. Yet there is an elf and a dwarf in this fellowship. The 2 young hobbits are useless. They go along because they say, you'll have to tie us up in gunny sacks if you don't let us go. But they're only going into peril. They can't add anything to the fellowship. Whereas, for instance, 6 5,000-year-old elves from Elrond's household would probably have been able to add a great deal to the Fellowship. Instead, there's that. But probably the biggest problem with the Fellowship is Boromir, who has been told ahead of time in the Fellowship. He is told what the One Ring is. Frodo brings it out and shows it to everybody. And Boromir can't for the life of him understand why we're talking about taking this into Mordor and destroying it. Why aren't we talking about using it? Surely it has come into our hands at just this time for the right reason. Surely we can use it to destroy the Dark Lord. He has to be told many times that the ring is altogether evil. It knows only one master, and it corrupts anyone who tries to use it. No, we cannot use the ring. Boromir accedes, but he's not convinced. he's not convinced. The Fellowship heads out and immediately encounters trouble. The route that they wanted to take over the mountains to get, on their way to Mordor is blocked by horrible snowstorms. They can't do that. There's no way that they would be able to make it. So they have to take, instead of going over the mountains, they have to go under the mountains through the old abandoned dwarf kingdom of Dwarrowdelf. They have to go through Moria, the mines of Moria. And in the mines of Moria, they encounter orcs who are living down there and who fight them. And they also encounter a Balrog, a demon of the ancient world. A giant sorceress thing who is, at heart, at the beginning, the same kind of creature that Gandalf is and the same kind of creature that Sauron is, but grown immensely powerful and fierce, a being of flame and darkness that is purely sorceress. So it's an overwhelming force. The Fellowship can't fight against it. Gandalf can. And he does. He fights against the Balrog, and they both fall into a seemingly bottomless chasm. Apparently dead. Apparently lost. The Fellowship is heartbroken, but they go on. They escape from Moria, and they go on. They go, for instance, to Lothlorien, another kingdom of elves, this ruled by Galadriel, unrecognizable version of whom will be available to you in the Rings of Power. This is a completely different character. And we learn, while the Fellowship is in Lothlorien, that Galadriel has another one of the great elf rings. That is the source of her power as well. And once the Fellowship is rested and have recovered a little from their grief over the loss of Gandalf, they go on. They're going to go on with their quest. I've had a grievous blow right out of the gate. We've lost our leader. But it's still the right thing to do. We're still going to go on. And they aren't that far along when they're attacked by a massive band of orcs. Hundreds of orcs. Attack their encampment. And scatter their Fellowship. Legolas and Gimli are fighting and hunting and killing orcs in the woods. Merry and Pippin are abducted by this band of orcs. And Frodo flees. And Sam flees with him. Frodo isn't fleeing from the orcs. Not mainly. Because right before that happens, right before the attack happens, Boromir decides, well, enough of this. This is insane. The wisdom of the elders notwithstanding, this is insane. I want the ring. Frodo has to put it on. And when you put it on, it turns you invisible. He has to put it on in order to flee from Boromir, his own Fellowship member. And that no sooner happens than Boromir is fighting for his life against an unbeatable horde of orcs in order to try to save Merry and Pippin. They are taken. And Boromir is filled with arrows. He kills lots of orcs, but he is defeated. And that's where the Two Towers starts. It starts right there, in the midst of chaos. There we have the Two Towers of Orthanc and Barad-dûr. That is what's referred to in the title of this section of the book. Orthanc is the headquarters of Saruman, and Barad-dûr is the headquarters of Mordor. So all of the West seems to be caught between the very hunky, striated teeth of these two towers. Very ominous cover. And that's where we start this first chapter, which is about the passing of Boromir. But it's a very odd chapter to start this section of the book with. And those of you who are joining in, I know that a couple of you are starting this read-along having not read The Fellowship or having not read it in a long time. That's kind of interesting to me. I want to get to the right section here, and that's not always easy to do. here. I wonder if we can. Oh, well, no, we can do it. We can do it. We don't need to navigate tech. We can do it in this floppy old book that I got. In this chapter, very little happens. The chapter is called "The Departure of Boromir," and that has two meanings: one, departing from life, and the other, departing from the Fellowship. Aragorn comes upon Boromir when he's mortally wounded. He is going to die. And Boromir gets a chance, with great difficulty, to talk to him just a bit. And those of you who've seen the movie, here, while I'm talking, I can be finding this. It's bothering me. The Kindle is supposed to make this navigation easy. So it's kind of bothering me that it's not. But I don't need it right at the moment. So let's see what we have here. See if we can get where we're going. If you know that scene, the scene that I've just described, then if you know it from the movies, then you will know already what you're expecting. And you're not going to get that. Because the... goodness gracious. Okay, well, that isn't going to work at all. So here, let's move to the book. Wow, that's a blow against electronic reading, isn't it? Let's go to the book here. For the section that I want to read you, but I also want to talk to you about it. In Peter Jackson's movie, Boromir, who's played by Sean Bean, gets a fantastic departing line. Much better than is in the book. Because Boromir in the movie expresses his doubt in Rivendell. He expresses his doubt as to whether or not Gondor even needs Aragorn. Gondor is the hereditary king of Gondor. Aragorn is the hereditary king of Gondor. Boromir says Gondor has no king and Gondor needs no king. And openly doubts whether or not Aragorn is anything at all. And in the final death scene that Peter Jackson gives us, Boromir says to Aragorn, he calls him, my captain, my king. And you'll tear up. It's absolutely touching. In Tolkien, Boromir doesn't say that. He's far more to the point. There's no character arc for him. He says, I tried to take the ring from Frodo. I failed. I have paid. And it has a kind of stark beauty to it on its own. And Aragorn assures him, no, you did not fail. You've achieved a remarkable victory. That's a sentiment that's actually repeated later on in the chapters that we're reading for this first week. It is viewed by Tolkien and by other characters as a signature achievement that Boromir was able to master himself at the very end. I think that's kind of neat. But it isn't. He dies immediately after that. He has no more poetic final words than that. He dies immediately after that. And Legolas and Gimli come upon Aragorn holding his hand and bawling his eyes out. And then they have to decide what to do. Because everything is in tatters. Their original plan is completely in tatters. Frodo and Sam have headed off in a boat. They are obviously continuing the quest on their own. Frodo obviously doesn't want to endanger his friends anymore. And Merry and Pippin have been taken captive by orcs, who we very quickly learn, Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli very quickly determine that the orcs are in the employ of Sauron and Isengard, not Sauron. They have a white S on some of their insignia, and we're told that Sauron does not use Western letters, he does not use white, and he doesn't allow his real name to be used, so it's not him, it's Sauron. And Aragorn has no idea what to do. He feels bereft of leadership. All of his choices have gone amiss. And he decides that simple imperative morality dictates that we might be able to catch up with Sam and Frodo and maybe continue with the quest, but that would mean leaving Merry and Pippin to torture and death in Isengard. And we can't, morally speaking, we can't do that. We don't actually have a choice here. And so he and Gimli and Legolas decide they will go after the orcs. They will chase the orcs to rescue Merry and Pippin. They give no thought at all to the fact that the orcs number 200 and they are 3. And I don't think many Tolkien fans give much thought to that either. I don't think there's any doubt that Gimli, Legolas, and Aragorn could handle this orc band if they caught up with them. They're never fated to do that. But I don't think it's a lunatic decision on the part of our 3 main characters. I don't see that being a whole lot of trouble. An afternoon of fighting, but I think our guys would have won. They decide to do that. But first, they have to do something about Boromir. You can't just leave him there amidst a heap of dead orcs, defiled by them. They don't have time to dig a tomb for him. They don't have time to build a cairn for him. Even with Gimli's rock knowledge, they don't have the rocks necessary to do it. So they decide to put him in one of their boats and send him on his way down the Ender and over the falls of Rhoros, hoping the Anduin eventually goes past Gondor. They're hoping that it will take him home. And they sing, which doesn't happen in the Peter Jackson movies, of course, but it's a lovely touch in Tolkien. They sing. Aragorn sings a verse. They split up the four quarters of the winds, and they sing verses about the wind asking, "Have you seen Boromir the Tall?" It's very touching. Aragorn sings, Legolas sings, Aragorn sings. Gimli refuses, because the only option left to him is the east wind, and we do not sing of the east wind, nor do we ask it tidings. It's Sauron's wind. We don't sing about the wind that comes out of the east. So we don't get to hear Gimli sing. Instead, they send him off, and Tolkien gives us this passage. Sorrowfully, they cast loose the funeral boat, where Boromir lay, restful, peaceful, gliding on the bosom of the flowing water. The stream took him while they held their own boat back with their paddles. He floated by them, and slowly his boat departed, waning to a dark spot against the golden light, and then suddenly it vanished. Rhoros roared on unchanging. The river had taken Boromir, son of Denethor, and he was not seen again in Minas Tirith, standing as he used to stand, upon the white tower in the morning. But in Gondor in after days it long was said that the elven boat rode the falls and the foaming pool, and bore him down through Osgiliath, and past the many mouths of Anduin, and into the great sea at night, under the stars. That is just lovely. That is Tolkien in full voice. Not only is the imagery beautiful and the moment beautiful, but also the fact that he's mythologizing it right there in the moment. It is said. We're not told that it happened. It is said that this is already entered into a mythology. It's a grand send-off for a character who is one of the most flawed that we get in Tolkien. Just lovely. Just absolutely lovely. And then once that's done, Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn realize now we gather all your equipment together and we will run after these orcs. They've wasted a lot of time. They've used a lot of time. I shouldn't say wasted. They've used a lot of time taking care of Boromir. So the orcs have a huge head start. But they do it anyway. They bounce off at a full run. And that ends the first book, the first chapter of what we're reading for this read-along, this first part of this Two Towers read-along. That's it. That's all. Not a lot happens. It's believe it or not, in the hurly-burly of the Two Towers, a lot of stuff happens in the Two Towers. But in the hurly-burly of the Two Towers, this is a pause. A funeral pause. And it's lovely. The more I think about how it fits, the more lovely I think it is. And it's a perfect illustration of what I was talking about yesterday, which is that you won't miss all the details and the wording and the beautiful passages, but you might miss the tone shift. If you're just reading this straight through in a book, starting with the Two Towers really does have some advantages, especially for you people who've read the Lord of the Rings a million times. You might want to pull it down and not even refresh yourself with the Fellowship of the Ring, not even the Council of Elrond, which I love, one of my favorite chapters in any work of fiction. You might want to come straight to the Two Towers and see if it doesn't kick up all sorts of new insights. Lots and lots of fun. Hoping that you all join in. Loved if we had a few more co-hosts. But anyway, that is just a preliminary discussion here. Set the grounding for the Two Towers, and also we ease our way in with the departure of Boromir. A classic little demonstration of the genius of Tolkien is that there are two departures here. Boromir dies, but he also leaves. They give him a leave-taking. They give him a send-off. And we're told that he's redeemed. We don't really see it. It's far more obvious in the movie than it is in the book. In the book, the moment is so quick that it's almost over before you notice it. Boromir simply starkly says, "I tried to take the ring from Frodo. I failed. I have paid." And Aragorn immediately says, "No, this was a great victory. Few have ever achieved such a victory." And then it moves on. Boromir dies right after that. Then Legolas and Gimli show up. So then the conversation moves on to what to do and how to assess the situation. If you're not paying close attention, you'll miss that line about it being a great victory. If you see it, you're going to think about it. And that's wonderful. That is absolutely wonderful. So anyway, that is our opening here. I'm gonna wrap this up and have a long, stern talk with my Kindle. I can't praise these things for 2 years and have it fail on me. But even if I have to use this, I found this ratty trade paperback out in the wild. It's not in good enough shape for me to keep. I think that might be incipient mold. I grabbed it anyway. I had no idea. You find a Tolkien volume, you have to do a Tolkien read-along. That's just the rules. But I probably won't keep it. I'll probably throw it out. So I want to use the Kindle because let's finish off with my edition of the Two Towers is heavily annotated, if you know what I mean. so I want to use this. I'll just see what I'm doing wrong. And we got a good Tolkien discussion in there. I swear I could talk about this book forever. It's possible that if I don't exercise any self-control at all, I will talk about the next chapter tomorrow and also go on for 30 minutes. It's entirely possible that I will do that. We'll see. I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.